Hello, and thanks for tuning in to a previously recorded webinar. This webinar is brought to you by the University of Kentucky Department of Forestry and Natural Resources. I'm Billy Thomas, the host for the Forestry webinar series. After viewing this webinar, if you have any questions, please email us at forestry.extension@uky.edu and we will respond to your questions. Thanks again for watching this recorded webinar, and please enjoy.
All right. Well, welcome to Identifying Kentucky's Trees. And I'm excited about this evening. We've still got leaves out there, so this is great. And you can see we're starting out with an important tree here in Kentucky. Oops, let's go back. Starting out with an important tree here in Kentucky on the front, which is the white oak, and it's beautiful fall colors. It's great. So before we get into actual identification, I wanted to talk a little bit about Kentucky's forest. They are very important in this state. Almost half of our state is covered in forest land. That's 12.4 million acres. And as you can see from this map here, all of the dark green in the map, it represents our forested areas in the state. And we've got a lot of that in the eastern half. And right where my cursor is going right here right now is the Daniel Boone. And then we got a fair amount, lots of pockets of dark green throughout the state. The red represents urban area and the tan is our pasture land type stuff. But as you can see, that a lot of our state is forested, very important resource in this state for a variety of reasons. Ecosystem services, all the wonderful things trees do for us, and also for our economy. So it's important to kind of learn about some of these. Kentucky has 6 broad ecological regions, which lead to why we have such a great diversity of trees. We've got, and these are just very broad ecological reasons. We got the Appalachian Plateau and our Knobs region, which is very unique. It surrounds the bluegrass area. Then the bluegrass area, which is, you think of kind of as a somewhat of an open land now with large trees mixed in, the Mississippi Plateau and the Shawnee Hills, and then the Mississippi embankment, which has a lot of interesting and unique and very different from other parts of the state forest. But it's that those broad ecological regions that lead to the extreme diversity of our forest. And according to the Kentucky Division of Forestry, Kentucky is second only to Florida in the United States in diversity of its forest. It's pretty amazing. Now, for what we're going to be doing tonight, Kentucky has more than 120 different tree species. We won't get to all of those tonight, but like I said, we will go over some tools, learn a tool or two that are going to help you be able to identify at least a good portion of these trees. Of all of Kentucky's forests, approximately 75% are classified as oak hickory type. That means oak and hickory are the dominant trees in a lot of our forests. Okay, just a few fun tree facts. I always like to include these. The tallest champion tree in the state is 163-foot tall yellow poplar in McCreary County. We also call it tulip poplar and tulip tree. But this tree has been identified, and it's part of the Champion Tree program that's with the Kentucky Division of Forestry. They house that program. If you get a chance, take a look at it. It's really neat to see if there's a champion tree in your county. The largest recorded champion tree is a bald cypress, and it's in Ballard County, that is 415 inches in circumference, which is actually a little more than 34 feet around. Pretty amazing. Now, many of you all know this. Kentucky state tree is the yellow poplar, also called tulip poplar, also called tulip tree. And here we got a nice picture of it in spring flower. And then Kentucky state heritage tree is the Kentucky coffee tree. See that great big leaf there? Now, the Kentucky coffee tree used to be our state tree up until about the 1990s, and there was a push to pick a tree that was more represented across the state. So coffee tree became our state heritage tree. All right, now getting into some of a little more about our trees. Here we have a nice picture. This is Robinson Forest. This is the University of Kentucky's experimental and educational forest in Breathitt County. And you can see not only do we have all these unique ecological regions, just look at the diversity in the topography here in Breathitt County, these narrow, deep coves and these high ridge tops. Imagine the diversity of tree species there. Like we said, we have 120 plus native trees. 20 of those are oaks, at least 20 are oaks. 13 of them are hawthorns, which are great little understory trees. They're flowering and fruiting trees. We've got 10 hickories, including pecan, thus the oak hickory. 8 maples, including box elder, and we're going to look at it a little bit later on. And 5 elms. And those are just some of the groups that have a lot of trees in it. We've got lots more trees out there. Okay, some of our tree characteristics. When we're looking to identify trees, what's the first thing you probably look at? The leaves. Yep, that's at least this time of year, through the growing season. That's the thing that really kind of stands out to you. They got unique shapes or something. So we look at the leaves to help us identify. We look at the twigs and buds to help us identify as well. And that's usually when we don't have any, especially the twigs and the buds, when we don't have leaves, like in the winter, because a lot of people like to do or have to identify trees during the winter. Now for the buds, I will say those are also important this time of year in identifying trees as well, even with the leaves on, and we'll talk more about that. We can use the flowers as long as the tree's flowering to help us identify the trees. Some trees have really unique flowers like you saw with that yellow poplar. The fruit, as long as the tree's in fruit, it can be a good confirmation, or it can instantly tell you what that tree is. The bark can be very helpful. We have several trees in this state that have very unique bark. I can think of American sycamore for one. It's that camouflage, that peeling bark. River birch with its peeling bark as well. And here around the central part of the state, we've got hackberry, which it looks corky, like it's got little warts all over it. So bark can be helpful, but it can vary on trees, from young trees to old trees. So sometimes it's not the best. It wouldn't be maybe your first characteristic. And then location. Location can be helpful in confirmation of a tree, and that means, like, does it grow down in the bottom next to a stream? Is that where it's growing, or is it on a ridge top? And this is appropriate in a natural setting. You wouldn't be able to use location in a neighborhood or a park or someplace where trees could very well have been planted. And so those can be good characteristics, but probably the best and easiest one to start with are the leaves. And I'm glad we still have leaves on the tree, so that maybe when we get done tonight, you all can go out and try to identify some trees around your house or your property. So that's what we're going to look at tonight, are the leaves. So our leaves, we have 2 broad groups of leaves. There's needle-like leaves, and then there's the broad leaves. Okay, so the needle-like leaves, that would be like this bald cypress here. It looks like a little needle. Pine trees are another example, and we'll talk a little more about those. But our needle trees are conifers, the cone-bearing trees. Most of those are evergreen, with the exception of this example right here, bald cypress. It is a deciduous evergreen. It does lose its leaves every fall and grows them again in the spring, just like our deciduous broadleaf trees. And then the other group is that broadleaf group. We've got 2 examples here, shellbark hickory and bur oak. The majority of our trees are broadleaf in this state. We do have, and we'll talk about our conifers, but we have far more of the broadleaf trees here in the state. We have at least one example I can think of that's native you would find in the woods that is an evergreen that is broadleaf, and that is our American holly. Okay, quick warning here. All leaves of the same species and even the same tree are not exactly the same. Here's a black oak, here's a black oak, and here is a black oak. As you can see, I'll use my cursor, you've got how broad this first one is, hardly any indentations in it, and look at this one, deep indentations, and even the color looks a little bit different. And then this third example here, shiny. I mean, it almost looks like it's evergreen, and that's all from the same species. So when you're looking at leaves, it's always important to look at multiple leaves. Look at as many as you can, and when you start seeing a good consistent pattern, I'd feel comfortable with that leaf. All right, so let's move on to our conifers. These are our cone-bearing trees, and like we said, most of these are evergreen, with the exception of bald cypress. But we have 9 of them in the state, so that makes their identification a little bit easier than our broadleaf trees. And so we'll just run through these real quick. We have eastern red cedar, northern white cedar, arborvitae, which is kind of rare in this state, at least out in the wild. You'll find it planted a fair amount, but we're kind of on the southern end of its range. There's eastern hemlock, bald cypress, eastern white pine, pitch pine, shortleaf pine, Virginia pine, and last loblolly pine, which has actually been introduced to the state, and mostly in the western half of the state where it was used in the pulp and paper manufacturing. Okay, so all our conifers are going to have different types of needles. Some of them have the scale-like overlapping scale type leaves. Some of them have this single leaf. And then most of them are going to have these needles that are in groups or bundles. So it looks like they're held together with a little woody stopper down there at the bottom. Okay, so let's talk about conifers with flattened needles that are scale-like. We've got eastern red cedar, and this one we've got both mature leaves. These are the compressed overlapping scale leaves, and then this is new growth with that spiky, those sharp spiky little needles, and those will be sharp to the touch. And then we have northern white cedar. It is the other one with the overlapping scale needles, nice flat sprays. These can actually lay down flat on a table. No spiky needles at all on that northern white cedar. Very soft and delicate to the touch. So our cedars are the ones that have scale-like overlapping needles. Okay, so conifers with single needles. These are just one single needle plugged into the stem all on its own. As we mentioned, bald cypress. Bald cypress has single needles, and it is a deciduous conifer, so it loses those needles each fall and grows them again in the spring. But it has very soft, feathery foliage. You'll see it quite a bit in landscape. It does. People like to plant it around their yard. It's a pretty tree. It has lovely bark on it as well. And then there's eastern hemlock, and you can clearly see how there's a single flat needle. These are very small, an inch maybe, but they're very cool. They got these little white stripes. We always called them white racing stripes on the back in our dendro class. So the two conifers that have single needles are bald cypress and eastern hemlock. Now the rest of our conifers have needles in bundles, and by counting how many needles in the bundle is what's going to help you identify this tree. We'll start with our Virginia pine, which has 2 needles in a bundle, and I've actually highlighted it and circled it in red. Here you can see there's 2 little needles. They're like stuck together, and with Virginia pine it's kind of cool. The needles, they're not very long and they're kind of twisted a little bit. So it's kind of easy to pick a Virginia pine out. We call it scrub pine as well. It's the pine that'll tend to grow on less fertile sites for the most part. Now we do have another pine that has some needles that are in groups of 2, but it also has some needles in groups of 3, and that's our shortleaf pine, a little more stately pine, a little more site demanding than our Virginia pine as well. But if we look here, I've got a group of needles I just highlighted in red that are in a group of 2. But if we look down over here, and you all may not be able, I don't know how big your screens are, be able to see it, but over here, I think it's right here, we've got a group of needles that are in groups of 3. So when you're looking at pines, even, like I said, you need to look at multiple leaves on a broadleaf. You need to as well on a pine tree, because you could walk up to that shortleaf and go, oh, 2 needles, it's just shortleaf pine. But if you would have looked further, you would have found some that were in groups of 3 as well. So Virginia pine, needles in 2s and twisted. Shortleaf pine, needles in 2s and 3s. Okay. Now we have pitch pine. It kind of reminds you a lot of shortleaf pine in its looks, with the exception of its needles are in 3s. It does not have any groups of needles in 2. Pitch pine, you might confuse it with loblolly pine because it also has its needles in groups of 3, with the exception that pitch pine needles are only about 3 to 3.5 inches long, whereas loblolly are 2 times, if not 3 times longer, much longer needles on that loblolly. Needles can be 6 to 9 inches long. So that's just a good thing to remember with those. So pitch and loblolly have needles in groups of 3. And then lastly, our eastern white pine. Many of you all may know this. You may have it planted in your yard. It has needles in groups of 5. It's the only conifer with needles in groups of 5. So those are our conifers with bundled needles. As I mentioned, all of our conifers are evergreen with the exception of the bald cypress. That's not to say that they don't lose needles, they just don't lose them all at once. They'll lose them throughout the growing season. Okay, so now let's get to the broadleaf key characteristics. As we mentioned, and you can kind of figure out, most of our trees are broadleaf, so we got a little bit more to go through. There are some key characteristics that we will look at, and a couple that we're going to focus on tonight. The leaf arrangement, and that's the leaf form, the leaf margin, you know, the edge of the leaf, leaf tips, you know, what the very tip of that leaf looks like, the leaf base, where it's connected to the leaf petiole. Those are the main things that we'll look at this evening, but we're really going to focus on leaf arrangement, leaf form, and leaf margin as we go through our the tool that we're going to use. Okay, I also wanted to talk about the bud. While we have leaves on the tree right now, we're still going to be looking at the buds that have already been set on our samples that I've got in pictures here, and maybe for samples that you might have in your extension office. But I've got just a little diagram of a bud. This is a naked bud. The leaves have already come off. You've got your terminal bud, which is the leader that's going to elongate that shoot, and we'll have leaves there as well. And then we have lateral buds, and there's your little lateral bud right there, and right below it is the leaf scar. Then this one's actually labeled down here. The leaf scar that's where that leaf was attached during the growing season. It's already senesced and fallen off. But you can't underestimate the importance of the bud. The buds are the location of new stems, fruits, and leaves. And the bud is an undeveloped shoot and normally occurs in the axil of a leaf or at the tip of the stem, just like we've got here our terminal bud or that lateral bud, and it's next year's leaves and stuff. So locating the lateral bud is critical to the identification of broadleaf trees, and you're going to see that as we go through our examples this evening. And it's great that it's a little later in the growing season because buds have been set. When you first start looking at leaves in spring, right as they flushed out, a lot of trees, there are no buds set, so sometimes it can make it difficult determining leaf form. Okay, let's just look at a few. So here we got a great, this is pawpaw. It has a very unique terminal bud. It's this brown furry. I always think it reminds me of like a moth's antenna. And then you can see the lateral buds down here, but it has brown fuzzy buds. And here we've got two small buds still tucked in the base of these leaf petioles on the maple. And we've got very small buds, alternating buds here. And on this sample here, this is a buckeye, kind of large buds. It's got kind of large leaves, but nice and pointed, easy to identify. And then this little guy right here, this is from the yellow poplar, our state tree. It has a very unique terminal bud. It looks like a duck's bill. And then lastly is the American beech. It's got very characteristic sharp pointed buds, we always thought they looked like cigars or something, is what we said in our tree ID class. Okay, we'll talk about leaf arrangement because that's where we're going to start. Once we decide if we've got a needle or a broadleaf, the next thing we're going to focus on is how those leaves are arranged on the stem or the twig. And leaves can be arranged in one of three ways. They can be opposite, they can be alternate, or they can be whorled. And opposite is just like it sounds. They're right, and you can see my cursor moving there. They are right across from each other on that twig. And what's cool is we have 4 different groups of trees, and that's it, just 4 different groups of trees that have oppositely arranged leaves that grow natively in Kentucky. Maple, ash, dogwood, and buckeye. So if you can remember the mnemonic mad buck, you've got it made. So if you come up to a tree and it's got oppositely arranged leaves, it's going to be one of, and if it's native and it's in the natural planting, it's going to be one of these, a maple, an ash, a dogwood, or a buckeye. The remaining species are alternately arranged. So, and you can see over here in our alternately arranged picture how these, the leaves are in alternating form along that twig, and that would continue on up. So most of our species, most of our trees are alternately arranged. We do have one that we see somewhat throughout the state, not a whole lot because we're kind of on the southern tip of its range is the whorled pattern where those leaves actually encircle that twig, and that's the northern catalpa. So we'll really be looking mostly what you're going to see either opposite or alternate. Okay, so let's look at some actual pictures. So this is the alternate one. The sample here is American beech, and you can clearly see that it alternates on that twig. And over here, we can clearly see that these guys are opposite, right across each other on that twig. So they can stand out pretty well. You won't have a whole lot of problem as long as buds have set, being able to tell if they are alternate or they are opposite. And then the next thing we're going to look at after we've determined if our leaves are alternate or opposite is the leaf form. Is it a simple leaf or is it a compound leaf? And a lot of our trees are simple leaves, and this over here is our example of a simple leaf. How to determine there is a bud. There would be a bud growing here at the base of this leaf petiole, and then there's just one single blade attached to that petiole. A bud at the base of it and one single leaf blade attached to that petiole, and that's a simple leaf. An example of a simple leaf would be a black cherry, a white oak, a red oak. Those are examples of simple leaves. And then the other ones are these are palmately, pinnately, and bipinnately compound. And these we're going to have to look a little bit harder. So you would come up to this specimen and you'd look at the base of a leaf, and these, as I'm moving my cursor, this looks like a leaf, and look for a bud, and I don't see one there. You look on this one, and I'm not seeing a bud there either. And so I don't find a bud at the base of any of these. Instead, where I find the bud is down here at the base of this leaf petiole. This is the actual leaf petiole, and this is the bud that's at the base of that. And these are actually called leaflets. So they aren't actually a leaf. This whole thing is a leaf. What I'm circling is a leaf. And this leaf is made up of 5 leaflets. And the way you tell it is there are no buds at the base of the leaflet. There is a bud at the base of this other petiole stem. And this is a palmately compound, so it's shaped like a palm. And then we have pinnately compound, and we've got quite a few tree species that are pinnately compound. And again, you would look at the base of the leaves, which you think these might be leaves. They're going to turn out to be leaflets, and you're not finding any buds there. So you move on down this stem, it looks like to you, or leaf petiole, and there's the bud down there at the bottom of that. So that tells you that this whole thing is your leaf, and it is a pinnately compound leaf because there are no buds at the base of these leaflets. And for this example, there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 leaflets. A lot of times number of leaflets can help or indicative of a certain species, and you'll see that when we work through our little our book here in just a minute. And then I was going to say, of our pinnately compound trees, hickories are pinnately compound, walnuts are pinnately compound, black walnut. We have quite a few trees that have pinnately compound leaves. And then the last one is this great big leaf over here. So you would check your leaflets, these little bitty ones, you're not seeing anything at the bases of these. And then you look at the base of, you think, okay, maybe that's the compound leaf. But in actuality, there are no buds there. Instead, the bud is down here. And this whole leaf rachis here makes this whole thing a leaf. So the bud is at the base here with no buds to be found along any of these leaflets. Examples of bipinnately compound would be our Kentucky coffee tree, like we saw in that example. They're really big leaves. So leaf form is the next thing. After we look at leaf arrangement, we look at leaf form. And that's our bud is really going to help us determine if we have a simple leaf or if we have a compound leaf like these. Okay, so let's look at a few examples. This is a simple leaf form. I've highlighted in red or circled in red the buds. So we'll look at this one down here. We've got a bud, and then we follow that leaf petiole out, and we see we have one blade. So that becomes simply a simple leaf. There aren't multiple leaflets off of that. We've got just this one shiny, probably black gum, I'm guessing, species here. So the bud, follow the petiole out, and you've got one plain blade. So this is a simple leaf form. Okay, now let's look at a compound leaf form. You probably walk up to this, and when you first start looking, as you can see my cursor here on the leaflets, checking these guys out, looking at multiples, because maybe something's wrong. Remember, look at multiple leaves. I'm not seeing any buds there, so I keep going farther down, go to the main twig there, and what do I see? There's a bud. We have a bud there, and actually quite a prominent bud. So it stands out quite well. We see the bud, so that indicates to us that this outlined in yellow, that whole thing is the leaf, and that this sample is made up of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 leaflets. In this example is a black walnut, and they tend to have very large leaves, very large buds too, so you can kind of see that bud quicker than having to look at all of these little leaflets. But this is the compound leaf form. You've got a bud at the base of this long rachis and all these little leaflets. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about leaf margins. These are the edges of the leaf. A grouping is, or one type of margin is entire and unlobed. And as you see, I'm kind of going around our red bud here. Nice, smooth, no teeth, serrations, or anything on that. That would be called entire. And there's no lobes, no indentations. The same thing when you look down here at the bottom. Example, this is an umbrella magnolia, nice and smooth, no teeth around that. So this would be an entire or unlobed leaf margin, as opposed to lobed margins. And these are oaks, and our oaks have lobed leaves, and we have several other trees that have lobed leaves as well. The top example here is a red oak, and the lobe is, I'm kind of circling it right here. That would be a lobe. This is a lobe. Down here is a lobe. And the indentations, those are called sinuses. And you can see them actually quite a bit better down here on the white oak. The white oak is the sample on the bottom. You've got these lobes. Actually, it's got 8 lobes if you counted them all. And then it's got very deep sinuses, or those indentations. And there are a few oaks that aren't lobed, but the majority of our oaks do have lobed leaves. And telling red oak versus white oak, red oak will have bristle tips. As you can see, I've got my cursor on that bristle tip, sharp little points. It looks like there's a little hair on it. And with our white oak, it'll have a much more rounded leaf tip, no bristle tips at all. So we've got entire margins, we've got lobed margins, and then lastly we've got serrated margins. Serrated margins are, think of a steak knife, that serrated steak knife. And as you can see, it looks like little teeth all along the edge. Same here. These look maybe a little more prominent than this. Those serrations will vary from species to species. Some, like an American beech, will have very sharp, prominent serrations, and some, like this hackberry down here on the bottom, will be much finer. And they do show up, but they don't stand out quite like the beech. A black cherry has very fine, tiny little serrations. Sometimes you got to look really close. So that's a good thing to make sure you look close at that leaf. Now, we do have some trees that are both lobed and serrated, which an example would be our red maple and a silver maple. They have both lobes and the edges of their leaf margins are serrated. Okay, so we've looked at leaf arrangement, we've looked at leaf form, and we've looked at leaf margins. So let's see if we're ready to do a little test. I bet you guys are. Okay. Number 1, is this a conifer or a broadleaf? I bet you all got it. It's a conifer, that's right. This is clearly a needle tree, and if we actually looked close, we could count those needles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have an eastern white pine right here. So this is a conifer tree, or a needle type tree. Very good. How about this one? Is this leaf arrangement opposite or alternate? I bet you got it. It's opposite. Yep, you can see the 2 little buds tucked in at the bases of the leaf, of the leaves, and they are right across from each other on that twig. Okay, number 3, alternate or opposite? Look close. It's pretty. We got one there and one there and one there. That's right. This is an alternately arranged tree. Very good. How about this one? Now, if you look close, the buds do show up on this one. They are a sulfur yellow, and we are going to see them there. So that tells us there's none on the bases of these, that this is a compound leaf. All right. And this is a bitternut hickory, one of our hickories. And as I said, they have pinnately compound leaves. Number 5, leaf margins, lobed or entire. That's right, those are lobed. You can count those on that white oak, nice lobed leaves. Okay, 6, is this statement true or false? This leaf is lobed, serrated, and compound. What do you think? False. That's right. This leaf is clearly not lobed. It is not serrated. It has a nice entire margin, and it is not compound because we can see, as I'm circling with the cursor, the bud, one short leaf petiole, and one leaf blade. So that statement is false. Number 7, leaf margins. Is this entire or serrated? That's right, it's entire. This was actually our example, our red bud. It has a nice, smooth, entire leaf margin. Okay, which one of these does not fit the sequence? A, B, C, or D? Bet you got it. Yep, that's right, C. The pawpaw leaf does not fit the sequence. It has a nice, smooth margin. There's no indentations or anything. And our sequence with A, B, and D, clearly serrated, like within this beech here, clearly serrated leaf margins. Bet you did good. Well, good job. Okay, I think we've practiced a little there. Now we're going to look at the tool that we're going to use, and we're going to practice with it this evening, and that tool is called a dichotomous key. It's simply a process of identifying trees. It's a logical sequence to get you to your answer. So by breaking apart all of this into small pieces, a dichotomous key can help us get to the answer by asking us certain specific questions about leaf type, if it's needle or broadleaf, leaf arrangement, alternate or opposite, leaf form, compound or simple, leaf margin, and that's going to get us to the answer as to what kind of tree we have. And I've got a quick extremely abbreviated example here, so you can kind of see how a dichotomous key works. Now we have dichotomous keys for all kinds of organisms, not just trees, but so you might have run into one of these before. You'll notice everything's in twos, di meaning two, so we'll start at the top or at the beginning and start trying to answer these questions to get to the answer. What is this leaf specimen right here? So we'll start at A. Does the tree have needles or does this tree have leaves? Yes, this tree has leaves. We can see nice broad leaves. So now our key is sending us to B, to the sets of questions at B. Are these leaves opposite or are these leaves alternate? Well, I've circled in red for us here. There's a leaf and we move up and there's an alternating leaf and another alternating leaf. So we clearly have alternating leaves. These are alternate leaf arrangement. So now we're going to go down to the set of questions at C. It asks, are the leaves simple or are the leaves compound? Well, if we look at our example here, we can't quite see a bud, but there's a little bit of a bud here at the base of a leaf petiole. We follow that petiole up and we see we have only one leaf blade. So we have a simple leaf. So now it takes us down to F, and bingo, we have a serviceberry. So then, like I said, this is a very abbreviated form, but just to kind of introduce it before we jump into the book. This is a serviceberry, and what you see, Linkia canadensis, is its scientific name. All organisms have scientific names because, as you know, with common names, serviceberry can also be called sarvis. Yellow poplar has a multitude of common names. So each organism has its own unique scientific name, so there isn't a lot of confusion. But for this evening, we're using common names. Okay, so the tool we're going to be using tonight is the dichotomous tree finder. And some of you in the extension offices, your agents may have been through a training where they got one of these or picked one up, and maybe you've got it in the office and you'll get to actually use it. But if you don't, and for those of you at home who do not have this, not to worry. I've taken photographs of every page as we go along so you can see how this works. But these are great little tree finders. There are 4 trees in the eastern half of the United States. It's pocket size, so it's great to take out in the field. It's only about 75 pages. It's not big and heavy, bulky field guide. Everything's pretty visually driven. They don't use a lot of scientific jargon, very clear, straight language in identification. And another great thing about them, you can buy them, probably find them best at an online site such as Amazon or an online bookstore. And they're a little older, as you'll see. This printing was 1998. The price, $3 to $5. So this is a great little investment for you to get out and start practicing a tree identification. And this one's for leaves. They also have a tree finder for trees that do not have their leaves for in the winter as well. But we're going to focus on leaves tonight. Okay, let's jump in. So I have an example for you. I know in some of the extension offices, some of the agents were able to gather some samples for us, but that will be our next, the next tree that we key out. But I just included a picture. I've done pictures for this one of a certain species here, and because I wanted us to kind of walk through the key once and then let's do it again. So we go to our tree finder on page 5. The first part of that tree finder is full of a lot of information about where trees grow, what some of the symbols mean, and things like that. So on page 5 is where it starts, and it's easy to see. See what I mean? Starts here. So as you can see, we've got questions or statements. They're in groups of 2, and we'll read our statement and see which one is the appropriate one, and then we will do what it says. So up here it says, if the tree has needles, start with this symbol. And when we look at our sample here, those look pretty broadleaf to me. If the tree has leaves, start with this symbol. So I think we need to go to page 14. So we'll flip over to page 14, and we're going to go to this top bracket up here, because we can stop back. See a symbol, it's going to tell you, and I sometimes hold my thumb in the book when I flip back and forth. It looks like an idealized tree. So that's that top bracket up here. We've got 2 questions to look at. If the leaves or buds grow opposite like this, go to below. I'll pull up our leaf sample. If the leaves or buds grow alternately like this, go below. Well, here our leaf sample, I've actually put a nice white arrow to help us decide if those grow opposite or alternate from each other. What are you all thinking? Right across from the stem, and we can even go up here where I've got the cursor, and you can see that they are growing opposite from one another. That's right. So we're going to follow this symbol down to the next set of brackets because we're going to have another question. So remember, that question we just answered was about leaf arrangement. The next one's going to be about leaf form, whether it's simple or compound. So if we read our first question or statement, if the leaves are compound, composed of several leaflets, look, it tells us, it reminds us right here, you can tell leaves from leaflets because there is no bud at the base of the leaflet. Well, let's take a look. I think I've even got another, yeah. So we got a more close up. So if we're looking at the leaves, we notice there is no bud right there. Instead, there is a bud down here. So at the base of these, which we now know are leaflets, there is no bud. Instead, we have a bud here. So that's telling us this whole thing is the leaf right here. So we have 1, 2, 3 leaflets. Same here, 1, 2, 3 leaflets on our leaf. So it is clearly a compound leaf. So now we're going to stay on the same page. We're going to go down here. We've got 2 more statements to try to answer. So now it's asking a little bit about how many leaflets. If 5 or more leaflets radiate from one point. Well, we don't have 5 leaflets, but they also don't radiate from one point, do they? That would be a palmately shaped one like we saw with in our first, when we're looking at the diagram. So let's go down to see if this one's a better fit. If the leaflets do not radiate from one point, or if there are only 3 leaflets, well, let's count those again. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We can't quite see all of it over here. We've got 3 leaflets, so we're going to need to go to page 16. So we go over here to page 16, got our sample there in hand, and we go to that top bracket. That was the one, and we'll just double check. Yes, we're going to that top bracket. Okay, so now we're going to answer, see which one of these statements fits best. If the leaflets are different sizes and shapes, it is a box elder, or if the leaflets are a similar size and shape. Well, as I'm going around with my cursor here, that leaf, This one at the top looks quite a bit larger than the ones on the side, and its shape is a little bit different. Look, we have some indentation, some lobing on it as opposed to on these. So to me, that's telling us that we have a box elder right here. And if we look at the picture of the box elder, it looks just like our sample. It's kind of neat. One thing about a box elder, remember this was an oppositely arranged leaf. It is in the maple family. It's the maple that has the compound leaf. It's also the one a lot of people will confuse with poison ivy as well, because it's the leaves of 3. But so we have box elder. Pretty easy, I think. A little, maybe not easy. I know there's a lot to go through and a lot to take in, but I think going through the key, trying to answer your different statements, see which one fits best, is very helpful. Okay, so now this is the sample that in some of the extension offices, the agents might have been able to get a couple of samples of branches for you to actually look at the leaves instead of just pictures. But not to worry, for everybody at home, or if you didn't get them, I've got pictures of all of the things that we're going to go through on this one. So this is the second and the last leaf that we will key out tonight. We're going to start at the top again. Does the tree have needles? Does this tree have leaves? What do you guys think? Yep, I think clearly it has leaves, a nice broad heart-shaped leaf. So we're going to go to our guide and go to page 14 to that top symbol, because now our next question is going to be about leaf arrangement. It asks now if the leaves or buds grow opposite or if the leaves or buds grow alternately. Well, I've highlighted where these leaves connect, and these are alternately arranged leaves. Alternate there, alternate there. See if you can see it up there. You can see them on this. This is clearly an alternately arranged leaf pattern. So now we're going to go to page 21, get a little farther in our guide. Okay, page 21, and it's the middle bracket that we went to this time. Now it's going to ask us about leaf form, compound or simple. So again, it states if the leaves are compound, composed of several leaflets, you can tell leaves from leaflets because there is no bud at the base of the leaflet. See, it reminds us. Or if the leaves are simple, not composed of leaflets. Well, on this species, it has relatively small buds. I've circled where the leaf connects to the twig, and there is a it's actually kind of hidden, tucked in that leaf petiole, but you got a bit of swelling right there. There is a very small bud there. You follow that petiole up, and there is just one blade right there. So that tells us that we have a simple leaflet. So now we're going to go to page 28. On page 28, we go to the bottom bracket, following that symbol. And now we're going to talk a little bit about leaf margin. So it asks if the leaf has neither teeth nor lobes, we go below, or go to the next page, or if the leaf has teeth of any kind, or wavy margins or lobes. Well, this guy looks pretty smooth. I don't see any teeth on there. I don't see any indentations. So I think that we've got something that's not lobed and has no teeth. So we're going to go to the next page, and it's the symbol at the top, the set of brackets at the top. Now it's going to ask us about leaf tip. We mentioned it, and I think you'll get this. This will be fine. We didn't go over it much, but if the leaf is tipped with a single bristle, like the tip of a needle, and you can see that in this picture right here, or if the leaf has no bristle at its tip, the leaf may be pointed or not pointed. Well, our leaf clearly is pointed, but I don't see a bristle on it. I don't see that like hair or needle-like coming out of that. So I think we've got a leaf that does not have a bristle tip. So we're going to go to the next page, to the top bracket. Now it asks us about the shape of our leaf. If the leaf is heart-shaped with veins branching from the base, it's a red bud. Or if the leaf is not heart-shaped. Well, as I outlined with my cursor, I think we got a pretty nice heart-shaped leaf. And then when we look at the venation, the veins, they really stand out nice. You can see how they radiate from the base of that leaf right there from where it connects to that leaf petiole. Very nice. And then when you look at the picture of the red bud, you see the little arrow there in the book, it looks just like it. So this is an eastern red bud, and a very common understory tree that we have here in Kentucky. find it out in the woods, and you find it a lot in landscaping. It's a very pretty tree, lovely pink and purple flowers very early in the spring before the leaves come out. And this time of year, as the leaves are starting to change, you'll notice seed pods, which are legumes. It is in the Leguminosae family. And it's just a real hardy little tree, and a lot of people do like to use it. So I hope that you've seen this evening, as we've gone through the guide, that by breaking some of this identification down into these smaller portions, it makes it easy to identify trees. And as I said, this guide's great. It's got well over 70 species in it, and it does the same for each one of the species. And plus, you've got pictures, nice line drawings that go with it as well. Oh, it's a redbud. Okay, good. So in summary, for tree identification, look at more than one leaf, like we mentioned, because they can vary, and some species like black oak vary greatly. You want to go out and practice using a dichotomous tree ID key. Practice helps a lot. And if you can get one of these little dichotomous keys, it will make a big difference. I really think it will. I know when I took dendrology, we did a lot of it kind of based on describing a leaf, and there was a lot of memorization in it. And then when we did winter tree identification, we discovered there's a key, and that's how, and we really learned our trees then by being able to use a key. If possible, visit the woods with someone who knows their trees. Nothing better than going out in the woods, looking at trees, getting them to help you use your dichotomous key. Contact your county agent with questions. You've got a tree that you just can't identify. Take some nice pictures of that tree. Get the leaf, the branching pattern, the bark, even the form. If you can stand back from it, get a good picture. Send it in, take it into your county extension agent. More than likely, they'll be able to tell you what you have. If not, they can send it on to the Department of Forestry. We'll look at it and see if we can't help you out as well. And be patient. Practice and be patient. It does take practice, but with practice, I'm sure that you all will be able to start identifying the trees around your yard, on your property, and it is. You start to look at trees very differently once you can identify them. I wanted to give you a few more tree ID resources, and these are paper resources. Again, mentioning the Tree Finder by May Watts, and then the Winter Tree Finder. Those are our little pocket guides, the $3 to $5 pocket guides. Like I said, best to probably find those on Amazon or Barnes & Noble online, because they're a little bit older and may not find those in a bookstore, but definitely worth the investment. They fit right in your pocket. Then we've got another publication. This is a University of Kentucky publication. It's FOR1, Kentucky Forest Trees, How to Know Them. This is by Deborah Hill and Diana O'Chevy. And those are $2 a piece. It's a nice, probably 100+ page little book. It's pocket size. It's tall, but it can still fit in your pocket. And we have included a key with it now. It did not originally have a key, but it's got a lot of information about where that tree grows, where it grows best, what kind of fruit it produces, what kind of wildlife would use it. So just a lot of good information there. Like I said, these are $2 a piece. If you're interested in those, you can contact us here at the Department of Forestry. You can actually find this on our website with our publications, and send us an email and order them, and we'll send them off to you. And then there's another book. Now, this is a hardbound, pretty hefty book, and this is Trees and Shrubs of Kentucky, Mary Wharton and Roger Barber. This has been around for quite a while, and it's a wonderful book. It is the Trees and Shrubs of Kentucky in spring with the flower, in summer foliage, in fall color, and with no leaves, and with fruit. So you'll get to see photographs of all of that, and just a wealth of information about that tree, where you'll find it in the state, what's special about it. A really nice book. You can find these if you have a local bookstore. You'll more than likely be able to find that there. If not, you can find it online at Amazon as well. And then if you decide you're really into tree ID and you're going to take this on the road, there is North American Trees. I think it's 5th edition by now, by Richard Preston. And this is what we used when I was in tree identification in college. It does have tree keys in the front. They're going to be more scientific, not quite as easy to read, as user-friendly as our tree finders, but they do have keys, and then they send you to groups of trees, families, And then you go from there to figure out which tree you actually have. A lot of information there, and it is the trees of North America, so there's a lot of trees in that one as well. So those are some good paper resources, but there's also a couple of online resources that I'd like to tell you about, and then I'm going to show you some here in just a minute. We've got Native Trees of Kentucky, and this is a nice website here in the University of Kentucky, and it's kind of linked up with the trees at our UK Arboretum, if anybody's familiar with that, or you're in the central Kentucky area. And then there's USDA Plants Database. This is, it's got a ton of information about plants. I use it for trees, but it gives you, you want to see if that tree grows in your county. It's got information down to that kind of level. So it's a great resource. And then there's Virginia Tech Tree ID. This is an online tree key, just like what we did with the paper, but this is an online tree key, and I'm going to show you that in just a minute. And then Arbor Day Tree Identification. Again, that's online tree ID, but they've got just a ton of information too about trees, Arbor Day, special programs that are going on there too. Got a lot of good information. And then last is the UK Department of Forestry Tree ID videos. So say you've taken the webinar and maybe you went and looked at a few, but then it's winter and the leaves came down and the leaves are coming out in the spring and you're thinking, I want to do this again. Now, what was it we did? You can go to these videos and hopefully you can go to these videos and look at how to do all of this stuff. So let me see if I can do this right. So let me go to, here we go. All right, I think I did it. Okay, so here we go. This is the first one I told you about, Native Trees of Kentucky. This is here at the University of Kentucky, this website is, and it's put out by the Department of Horticulture. And if you click on a tree, look, you just get all kinds of information. You get the Latin name, you get where it grows, just some general information, introduction to culture of it. They're going to give you botanical information, its native habitat, growth habitat, tree size. If you're thinking of planting it, good to go to a site like this to make sure that it's going to fit within your site. Tells you about the fruit, tells you even about cultivars and stuff like that as well. Okay, and the second one I wanted to show you is the Virginia Tech Dendrology, the tree keys, and these are online tree keys. And for these, you'd need to take a picture of your example or the tree you're trying to figure out. Make sure you include the branching pattern in that. And then you'd come to this, if it's a leaf, you'd come to the leaf key and go through the key just like we did with our tree finder book, except these are photographs. And if you get real good at it, you can do it with the tweak key as well. But again, taking pictures or bringing samples in for this one. And the last one I wanted to show you and this is on our Department of Forestry and Natural Resources website, and these are tree ID videos, and these were put together by a former wonderful tree ID expert forester that we had here in the department, Doug McLaren, and so he walks you through the basics, all of the stuff that we've been talking about this evening. So in case you want to jump back into that this in the spring and you kind of feel a little rusty, you can do that there. So let me see if I can get us back to, all right. So kind of wrap it up with some of our tree ID resources. A lot of great information out there. And I do hope that tonight's been informative. You've learned a little bit, maybe you feel a little less hesitant about trying to go out and identify all the different trees we have in Kentucky. Realizing with using something like a dichotomous key, it really does help break it down into small bits and pieces for you, so you don't have to take it all in at once, is the way I kind of look at it. So I hope you are able to get out and identify some trees while we still have leaves out this year, and maybe get your hands on one of the tree finders, and good luck and happy identification.
Thank you for watching this previously recorded webinar. Should you have any questions about the webinar you just viewed, please email forestry.extension@uky.edu. And for more information about forestry and wildlife in Kentucky, please visit us online at www.ukforestry.org. Thanks so much.